My name is Leila. I'm 32 years old. I work full-time at a mid-sized accounting firm, and I live alone in a small but quiet apartment on the east side of town. It's not the most glamorous life, but it's mine. I pay my own bills. I cook when I can. I call my mother every Sunday, even when the conversations are mostly one-sided. I've always believed in showing up for the people you love, even if they don't always do the same for you. That night, I had just finished folding laundry. The news was playing softly in the background, the same way it always does, more for comfort than content. I was scrolling through messages, not really expecting anything significant, when I saw the image. It was from Claire, an old childhood friend who still lived 2 blocks from where I grew up. She'd captioned it, "Didn't know your mom was redecorating. Wild choice of roommate, though." I tapped the image. My heart didn't react right away. My mind tried to process what I was seeing, like my brain was buffering slower than my phone. It was my old bedroom. The same familiar paint color. The window I used to stare out of while daydreaming. The dresser that had belonged to my grandmother. But the details were wrong. The bedding was new. There were weights by the closet. A white phone charger on the nightstand that definitely wasn't mine. And leaning against the dresser, unmistakably, was Eli's gym bag. My ex. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not even heartbroken, really. Just still. I hadn't lived in that room for years, but I guess I always believed some part of it would be waiting for me. Safe. Untouched. A quiet reminder that I still belonged somewhere. But seeing him in that space, my space, told me what I hadn't wanted to admit for a long time. I didn't have a place in that house anymore. Maybe I never truly did. Growing up, it was always just the 2 of us, my mom and me. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. From the outside, we looked like a close-knit mother-daughter pair, and sometimes we were. But more often than not, our bond came with strings I couldn't see until much later. My mother was a proud woman, proud to a fault. She rarely asked for help and wore her past like armor. I never knew much about her childhood except that she said it was harder than mine ever would be. That was usually the end of the conversation. I learned early on that sympathy wasn't something she wanted. Respect? Obedience? Gratitude? Always. But comfort? Softness and emotional connection? Those were in short supply. She never hit me or screamed. It wasn't that kind of story. But there was a quiet control in everything, a lingering pressure to constantly prove I loved her enough. If I didn't immediately answer her call, it was a sign I was drifting. If I spent the holidays with a friend's family, she'd sigh and say, "Well, I guess you found new people now." And if I did something kind, picked up groceries, helped with her car, she'd frame it as me finally stepping up like a good daughter should. No matter how much I gave, there always seemed to be more I hadn't done. And then there were the comparisons. There was my cousin Jana, who lived across town and visited only on Christmas, but whose photos always earned praise for how put together she looked. Then there were the girls on the church board, who brought their mothers fresh flowers every week. But the worst comparison, the one that really embedded itself under my skin, was Eli, my ex. Eli and I dated for 4 years. He was charming in public, polite to my mom, and knew how to talk about stocks and sports, 2 of her favorite things. But behind closed doors, he was different. Subtle manipulations, constant gaslighting. He chipped away at my confidence slowly, made me question myself so often that by the time I caught him messaging another woman, I still found a way to blame myself for it. I ended it. Quietly. No drama. Just a phone call and a bag left on his chat. When I told my mother, she paused for a long time and then said, "Well, he made mistakes, but he's still a good man." I think that moment hurt more than the breakup. Over time, I began to understand that she had emotionally adopted him, and in doing so, she'd let go of me. I was her daughter by blood, but he was her ideal. She even once told me after the dust settled, "You know, he was the son I never had." I remember freezing when she said it. I don't even think she realized what she'd done. Or maybe she did. After the breakup, I stopped coming around as much. I focused on work, moved into my own place, and carved out a little independence. But still, I kept sending money. Every birthday, every doctor visit, every winter bill. I contributed, out of love, yes, but also out of some strange hope that one day it would be enough. That if I just gave a little more, she might finally see me as enough. When she called me about her knee surgery, she sounded more tired than usual. I knew it wasn't a simple procedure. The insurance wasn't covering much, and without hesitation, I told her not to worry. I'd handle it. I took out a line of credit and wired the $12,000 to her account that same week. She didn't cry or say much, just a soft, "I knew I could count on you." I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. That maybe she'd finally see that I wasn't trying to win anything. I just wanted her to feel safe, to feel loved. I didn't ask for anything in return, not even a thank you. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have imagined, was that within a few months she'd let someone else take my place. Not metaphorically, literally. She gave my room to Eli, the room where I wrote essays late into the night, where I cried after school dances and whispered secrets to friends on the phone. That space still had echoes of who I used to be, and somehow she thought nothing of handing it over to someone who had broken me once already. And worst of all, she didn't tell me. She didn't ask. She didn't warn me. I had to find out through a photo sent by someone who assumed I already knew. That was the part I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about the room. It was about what the room represented. That deep, unspoken truth that no matter what I gave, I was still invisible in her eyes. It had been about a week before I saw that photo. I remember because I had been trying to call my mom that whole week. Not out of obligation, but because something in my gut felt off. We usually talked, even if briefly, every Sunday. Sometimes it was 5 minutes, sometimes 30. But that week, her phone rang 3 times and then went to voicemail. I tried again the next day. Same thing. By Wednesday, I left a message, just asking if she was okay and if she needed anything. No response. I didn't panic. I told myself she was probably tired or just in one of her moods. There were stretches where she'd go quiet, not angry, just distant, and then act like nothing. Happened when we finally talked again. Still, I needed to know she was all right, so I called my uncle. He lived closer to her and usually helped when something needed fixing around the house. When he picked up, he sounded cheerful. "Oh, she's fine," he said casually. "I was over there a few days ago. She's got company now. Eli's been helping her out." My heart dropped. "Eli?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard. "Yeah," he said. "Apparently he's going through a rough patch. Moved back in for a bit. Real nice of your mom to take him in like that. She said he's been keeping her company, running errands, cooking even. Guess she needed the help." I don't remember much of the rest of that call. I must have said something polite, something hollow, and hung up. My hands were shaking, but my face was still. It didn't hit until later that evening when Claire's message came through with the photo, the visual proof. I sat on the edge of my couch for a long time, just staring at the screen. Every piece of evidence confirmed what I had just heard. The gym bag, the weights, the second-hand mug on my old nightstand, the one I'd brought back from college. He wasn't just visiting. He was living there, and no one told me. Not my mom. Not Eli. Not even a passing word from the family. I had paid off $12,000 of medical, debt for her less than 6 months ago, and still, I wasn't even worth a phone call. That night, I didn't sleep much. My chest felt tight, not with rage, but with some unfamiliar mix of grief and distance. Like I had finally drifted too far out to be seen. By morning, I knew I needed to hear it from her directly. So I called. It rang longer than usual, but she picked up. Her voice was normal, as if nothing had happened. "Hi, sweetheart." I didn't respond right away. Just took a breath. "I talked to Uncle Ray," I said. "He mentioned Eli's staying with you?" There was a pause. Brief, measured. "Well, yes," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He's going through something. He needed a place." My throat tightened. "So you gave him my room?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You haven't lived here in years, Leila. It's not like I kicked you out." My room, my name, my memories, all reduced to a convenience she could offer to someone else. "You didn't think to tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she replied. "It's just a room. Don't be so emotional." That line, those 5 words, lodged somewhere in my chest and stayed there. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some acknowledgement. Maybe a quiet apology. But what I got was indifference, and that, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. I didn't argue. I didn't cry on the phone. I didn't remind her of the money or the loyalty or the late nights I spent worrying about her health. I just let the silence stretch long enough to say everything. Then I said, "Okay," and hung up. That was the last time I called her. Not out of revenge. Not even out of anger. But because something inside me had finally gone quiet. That part of me that kept hoping she'd choose me. That part that kept trying to earn the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or comparisons. In that moment, I realized the truth I had been avoiding for years. She had never really seen me. Not as I was. Only as I failed to be. And when the opportunity came to make a choice between comfort and consideration, between her daughter and her fantasy of someone else, she didn't hesitate. She gave my space away. Not just my physical room, but the space I had tried so hard to hold in her life. And I understood, finally, that I was done trying to earn it. There's a memory I've tried to bury more times than I can count. But it always finds its way back to me in moments like these. I was in college, about 21 at the time. It was mid-November, the kind of gray, damp cold that seeps into your bones. I had been sick for days, feverish, achy, barely able to drag myself out of bed long enough to eat something. I didn't have a car back then, and my campus apartment was small, shared, and poorly insulated. I remember lying under 2 blankets, shivering and alone, watching the snow fall outside my window. I called my mom. I don't know what I expected, maybe just to hear her voice, or maybe to ask if she could come by, bring some soup, maybe sit with me for an hour like she used to when I was a kid. But when she answered, her tone was already impatient. "Leila," she sighed, "you're not a child. It's a cold. You'll be fine." I remember the silence on the other end of the line. Mine. Because I didn't know how to explain that it wasn't just the flu. It was the loneliness. The aching that came from more than just a fever. It was the quiet realization that the one person who used to take care of me didn't have room for that anymore. "You're being dramatic," she added. "Rest. Drink fluids. You'll get over it." And she hung up. It would have been easy for her to come. 30 minutes, tops. But she didn't. A few months later, Eli caught a cold. Just a cold. I remember because we were still dating at the time, and I had been at work when he texted her to say he wasn't feeling well. By the time I got off my shift and arrived at his apartment, my mother was already there, in the kitchen, stirring homemade chicken soup on his stove like it was her own home. She looked up and smiled at me, like this was perfectly normal. "I figured he needed a little comfort," she said, patting his shoulder. He smiled weakly, playing up his sniffles like a 5-year-old looking for a treat. I stood there, stunned, remembering the exact sound of her voice when I had called her just a few months before. The same woman who told me to stop being dramatic had driven across town, uninvited, to care for my boyfriend. Not her daughter. Not the one with the fever and the empty fridge. But Eli? Eli got soup. Later, after the breakup, after the cheating, I came home in tears. I'd found the messages on his phone. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just sat on the edge of my bed and cried until my ribs hurt. I called my mom that night too. When she answered, I could barely speak. He cheated, I managed to say. She was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe she was just processing it. But then she said, "Well, relationships are hard. Maybe you were being too distant." That broke me more than the cheating did. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't come over. She didn't even sound surprised. But a week later, I found out she had met him for lunch. She brought him his favorite cookies, the same ones she used to bake when I was little. She told him to take care of himself and not be too hard on Leila. She's sensitive. I wasn't mad at him, not anymore. I was just numb. Because in that moment, something deep inside me clicked into place. Something that explained all the years of feeling just a little bit outside the center of her world. He filled a space in her life that I never quite could. Not because I didn't try, but because somehow he met a need in her that I was never allowed to reach. She relied on him, emotionally, socially, as if he were some extension of the family she always wanted. And me, I was the one who kept showing up, hoping she'd eventually see that I was enough, that I was already there. So when I saw that photo of my room, my space, given to him, I didn't feel surprised. It was painful, yes, but not unfamiliar, because in truth, the betrayal didn't begin with that photo. It began a long time ago, with a bowl of soup I never got, and a silence I was forced to grow up in. I didn't react right away. There was no midnight text, no dramatic confrontation, no emotional outburst. Instead, I did something that felt foreign at first. I let myself be still. I let the weight of everything I'd carried settle over me without rushing to fix it or explain it away. I took time, real time, to feel it. I cried the kind of tears that don't demand anyone's attention. I sat on my balcony for hours, in silence, watching the sky darken and brighten again, and I asked myself questions I'd spent years avoiding. What would happen if I stopped trying? What would it mean to stop earning a place that should have been mine all along? The next morning, I opened my banking app and canceled the monthly auto payments I had set up for my mother's medications and utilities. No message, no warning. Just a quiet click. Then I called the gas and electric companies, both of which had my name listed as a co-signer. I'd done it years ago after she had fallen behind on some payments. I remember how honored I felt then, that she trusted me to help, that maybe I was finally someone she depended on. But now that same trust felt like a chain. I submitted the paperwork to remove my name. When the representative asked for a reason, I simply said, "I won't be involved with the property anymore." The why, words felt heavy, but clean. After that, I found a therapist. It took 3 different consultations to find the right one, but when I finally sat across from a woman with warm eyes and no judgment, I told her everything, not in one rush, not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, like unraveling, a thread I'd kept tangled for far too long. She helped me find language for what I'd been through. She helped me understand that guilt is not proof of love, and that I was not obligated to carry someone else's emptiness just because they never learned how to hold it themselves. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a bad daughter. I felt like a woman who had finally stopped shrinking to be accepted. Months passed, spring melted into summer, and I started to feel light in ways I hadn't felt since childhood, like I could breathe inside my own body again. I picked up journaling. I started cooking for myself instead of just eating whatever was fast and cheap. I even signed up for a weekend pottery class, something I hadn't done since high school. And then, in early August, came the invitation, a cousin's engagement party, hosted at a banquet hall just a few miles from the neighborhood I'd buy. Grown up in, I almost didn't go. But something in me knew it was time, not for confrontation, but for closure. I wore a soft blue dress, nothing flashy, but something that made me feel grounded, present. When I arrived, the room was full of chatter and music, familiar faces, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Some people hugged me like I'd never been gone. Others offered polite nods, and then I saw her. My mother was standing by the buffet table, laughing with one of my aunts. She looked older than I remembered, not just in the way years add lines, but in the way heaviness gathers in the shoulders. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw hesitation flicker across her face. We spoke briefly at first. Pleasantries. Safe words. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. Later that evening, I found her alone on the balcony outside the hall, sipping from a glass of water, her gaze far off. I stood beside her quietly for a few moments before I spoke. "I needed a mother," I said calmly, not accusing. "But you chose someone else, so now I'm choosing me." She turned to look at me, her eyes sharp, that same edge I'd known my whole life. "After everything I've done for you?" she asked, voice tight. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't need to give one. There was no satisfaction in arguing, no point in proving anything anymore, so I simply nodded once. A quiet acknowledgement that I'd heard her, and then I walked back inside. That was the last conversation we ever had that held any weight. Later, as I was leaving the event, I caught a glimpse of Eli near the exit. He was leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, looking like he didn't quite know where to place himself. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away first. It wasn't triumph I felt in that moment, just closure. A soft, internal closing of a chapter that had been dragging on far too long. He hadn't just taken a room. He had taken part in a bond that was never truly whole to begin with, and he'd lost it too. Peace doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It comes in fragments, small moments. I used to think that healing meant waking up one day and feeling whole, that I'd finally be able to say, "I'm over it," and never think about the hurt again. But that's not how it works. Peace came, to me gradually, in quiet decisions and subtle shifts. It came when I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. I didn't expect anymore. It came when I walked through the grocery store and passed the aisle with the soup cans, the same kind my mother used to make for Eli, and realized I no longer felt that familiar ache in my chest. It came when I sat down with my financial advisor and restructured my budget, not around what I needed to give away, but what I needed to build for myself. The loan I took for my mother's surgery didn't disappear, of course. I'm still paying it off, month by month. But strangely, I no longer resent it. I think of it now as the price I paid for emotional freedom, a kind of final gift, one that closed a chapter. I stopped sending money, quietly, without announcement or argument. Instead, I opened a small savings account. I gave it a silly name, Project Me, and every month, the money I used to send home now goes there. It's not much, but it's mine. Within a few months, that fund helped me move into a new apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's bigger than the last place. Bright, airy, a little messy in the corners, but warm in all the right ways. The first thing I bought for the new place was a bookshelf, not because I needed one, but because I'd always wanted one, the kind that stretches tall with plants on top and room for stories I haven't lived yet. I painted one of the walls myself, even though the color didn't quite turn out the way I imagined. It's a little too bold, but I kept it. It reminds me that I don't have to get everything perfect to be proud of it. I started cooking again. Not because someone was sick or because I needed to take care of anyone else, but because I enjoy it. I've even started inviting friends over for quiet dinners, board games, and simple connection. Some nights I light a candle just because it smells like lavender and is calming. Some mornings I sit by the window with tea and write in a journal, not about pain, but about ordinary, beautiful things, the way sunlight hits the floor, the sound of someone walking a dog down the street, a laugh I didn't have to force. I've drawn new boundaries, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. My mother still lives in the same house. Eli may still be there, or not. I stopped asking, stopped needing to know. She's reached out once or twice since the party, just light messages, nothing meaningful. I haven't responded yet. Maybe someday I will, or maybe I won't. That part doesn't hurt like it used to, because for the first time in a long time, I'm no longer waiting to be chosen. I no longer measure my worth by the attention I receive, or the roles I play in other people's lives. I am no longer a daughter trying to fill a space that was always shifting. I am a woman standing still in her own space, a space I built, furnished, and claimed without apology. Sometimes I still think about that room, the one I lost. I wonder what it looks like now. If the walls still carry echoes of who I used to be. If there's any trace left of the girl who used to write poems under the covers with a flashlight, or cry quietly into her pillow when the world felt too heavy. But mostly, I let it go. Because that room wasn't stolen from me. It was the last piece I was meant to release. The last place I kept hoping to return to for comfort. Instead of building comfort in the present, losing that room taught me something I needed to learn, that I don't need to keep proving I'm worthy of love. I already am. I'm sitting now on my new couch, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, a small plant blooming by the window. The room is quiet. It smells like cinnamon and something I can't quite name. Peace, maybe. This space, this life, it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong.